Happy Monday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Hopefully your shortened work week is off to a pretty good start, and we do have some talking points when it comes to this week's weather. What time are our rain chances coming in, and is that going to impact any of your Thanksgiving plans? So we'll go over the latest. But first things first, we are on the board for rainfall in the month of November. It is a very minuscule amount. We recorded rain on back-to-back days. 2/100ths of an inch and then 1/100th of an inch this past Saturday and Sunday, actually Friday going into Saturday, excuse me, because all this data is taken as of yesterday. So 3/100ths of an inch of rain. It is a very minuscule amount, puts us nowhere close to our average that we typically see in the month of November, but at least we are going to go through the month of November and have some days that we've recorded rainfall. All in all, it still hasn't done anything in terms of not allowing our drought conditions to worsen. Maybe some areas got slightly better totals than what we did here at Middle Georgia Regional Airport, but we are still falling well below the totals that we should be on average, or even the record set back at just over 10 inches of rain back in 1992. So here's the latest update of the drought monitor as of last Thursday, really as of last Tuesday, but we got it released last Thursday. If you did miss it, we just saw the expansion of a severe drought for many of our western and southwesternmost counties, and we do see this orange color stretch across areas like Dodge, Telfair, Lawrence, Wheeler, and into portions of Montgomery and Treutlen counties. Most of Central Georgia and our most populated areas like Milledgeville, Dublin, Macon, Warner Robins, down to Perry, you guys are still under a moderate drought, so not quite as severe as the severe drought, obviously. But we are beginning to see those dry conditions continue to worsen over portions of Central Georgia because we just haven't had a whole lot of rain as of recently. And no rain looks to be in store for today, but we do have some scattered chances coming in as early as tomorrow in the late afternoon hours. And it is going to be cooler for Thanksgiving, not colder. Guess I had a little bit of a typo before I got that coffee rolling this morning. But it is looking to finally get the numbers back below average for a change because it's been a good stretch of some above average temperatures. We actually have to go back 2 weeks to that really big cold spell around Veterans Day for the last time we saw some below average numbers. So here's a walk around the quad, a much better image than what you walked out the door to, especially on the right side of your screen in downtown Dublin and the Georgia National Fairgrounds. No fog whatsoever anymore, and just plenty of blue sky mixed with some high level cloud cover. We were talking about some partly cloudy skies being present throughout this afternoon, and it's going to be a good combination of higher level cloud cover and maybe a few cumulus clouds that are a little bit lower that do a pretty good job of blocking some sunshine, providing you with some occasional shade. But so far, it's been a story of the warming trend. This morning, areas farther down to the south and the southeast were actually a couple degrees warmer than, say, up to the north and the northwest. But as we got into sunrise time, those areas kept the fog in the picture, and that did allow for the temperatures to stay cooler for just a little bit longer. So 64, 66, or a 67 degree mark in our southeasternmost counties that saw that dense fog. And then farther up to the north and the northwest, you can see some 69s, some 70s, 71, even 72s popping up on your temperature map. 72, the warmest number that we can spot, and that's in Warner Robins, Vidalia, Milledgeville, and all the way up to Sparta. So across the eastern United States, we are seeing some pretty similar temperature values. In fact, actually cooler over to the west, and that's courtesy of some rain-cooled air back in those areas. So that's the system that is going to make its way farther to the east and impact us as we go into tomorrow. But we see some 80s over in Texas, and those are the warmest numbers that we can spot. 79, not too far off of it in Orlando, but 80 degrees in Houston and Laredo. And in fact, those numbers 20 degrees warmer than what you see up in northern Texas. 60 in Dallas, 64 in San Angelo, and as you go all the way up into Amarillo in the northern portion of Texas, that's where you're still spotting some upper 40s. But many of our neighboring states, 65 in Montgomery, 62 in Jackson, and a 68 over in Charleston. So our temperatures are more reminiscent of what's going on, say, over in coastal South Carolina, as opposed to back over into Alabama and Mississippi to the west. So we did have the passage of a frontal boundary later in the afternoon on Saturday, and we started to get some drier air into the forecast. Not necessarily too much cooler air, but we have seen the humidity rebound. Dew point temperatures now somewhere in the upper 50s, even a 60 that we can spot in Monticello, 61 degree dew point in Dublin. And comparing it to much of the southeast, it's a very similar story. Some patchy areas of light green, in fact, more areas of light green here in the state of Georgia as opposed to back over to the west. but we are looking at the moisture content to increase as we go throughout the next couple of days, and that is going to result in some better rain chances. We have a steady breeze right now out of the east mainly, gusts up to 14 miles per hour in Milledgeville. At the most, you're seeing sustained winds up to 7, 8, maybe 9 miles per hour. Wind's not going to be too much of a factor today, but some occasional gusts could make for some breezy conditions. So 50 degrees for a morning low yesterday. We definitely got well below that as we started out this morning, somewhere in the mid 40s, the lower half of the mid 40s at that. 80 degrees for a high temperature. So we were 9 degrees above average for your morning low yesterday, and your afternoon high was 13 degrees above average. So we did flirt with another record yesterday, didn't necessarily get too close. 82 was the record yesterday. All time set back in 1979 most recently. Low temperature of back in 1956 of 24 degrees. We had a very significant cold spell as of 2 weeks ago. Very thankfully, we haven't been dealing with temperatures as low as that very recently. But the biggest thing I want to turn your attention to, look how far your year departure of rain has fallen. We are almost to the point where we're going to flip that positive into a negative in front of it. So we're getting to the point where we might be below the average of where we should be at this point in the calendar year. And this comes in light of a very dry stretch as of recently. Sunrise 7:12 yesterday and 5:30 p.m. was your sunset. Your sunset is going to continue to get earlier and earlier until we get into December 1st. 5:27 p.m. should be the earliest sunset that we see. And then as we transition closer into the end of the month of December, right there around the first day of winter, your sunset's actually going to already begin to get later, but that sunrise just continues to get later and later each day, and we will continue to see it get later until December 21st. So for today, 78 for a high temperature. Partly cloudy skies after we got that patchy fog out of the picture early this morning. We will be staying sunny and warm for the remainder of today with a southeasterly breeze mainly around 5 to 10 miles per hour, but some occasional isolated gusts up to 20 miles per hour in some pockets will be possible. So you will see 78 goes above what we see on our Meteogram, 75 into 76. I do believe that we'll go a little bit above what this graphic says. Very similar trend to what we've seen with the weather patterns as of recently. And then as we go into the evening hours, 72 by around 5 p.m. just before sunset, and 68 back into the 60s as we go into 6 p.m. I do expect tomorrow to be another cool morning, but maybe not necessarily as cool as what we had this morning. Here's your satellite and radar picture. Some patchy clouds here and there, mainly of the higher level cloud cover variety, but where that gray is a bit more profound in color, say down in Wilcox County, that's where the cloud cover is going to be a bit thicker than some of the higher level cirrus clouds that we currently have. So over to the west, plenty of cloud cover and already some showers closer to Memphis, getting over to Little Rock, back into Arkansas. This is all courtesy of our frontal boundary, which will continue to move over to the east over the next 24 hours, but no impacts from that whatsoever through the rest of today. Just a steady breeze, partly cloudy skies, and then that takes us into the evening hours where the cloud cover actually builds in to be more dense in nature. So this increase in cloud cover will help keep the numbers slightly warmer as compared to this morning as you walk out the door tomorrow. But you also could be greeted by a couple of scattered sprinkles, mainly of the light shower variety, not present all across central Georgia, just going to be present in patches. So you may run through a brief sprinkle shower. You'll have about a 5-minute period where you stay dry. And then once again, you come across another one of these light green dots. Nothing really substantial in the way of rain. That's actually going to come ahead of this frontal boundary. But you can see that the frontal boundary looks like it has a pretty defined shape right there as we get into the beginning of the prime heating hours of the afternoon tomorrow. This is mainly going to pass us to the north because this frontal boundary not going to have a clean sweeping motion through. It is going to stall a bit before it gets here. So as it stalls, it's going to kind of slow down in motion, but it's still going to push a line of showers out ahead of it. Doesn't look like any of those start to pop up in central Georgia until we get into the evening hours at the earliest tomorrow. So this is the time frame I want you to pay extra special close attention to, especially for your travel forecast. Many of you may be heading out of town later on Tuesday, trying to catch a red-eye flight, maybe really early on Wednesday morning. But this time frame, Tuesday night into the early morning hours on Wednesday, is when rain will be present in central Georgia, but you are going to have some afternoon shower and storm chances up in North Georgia tomorrow afternoon. So go ahead and make a note of that if you have to travel through the Atlanta area, going up through Athens, the North Georgia mountains, for wherever your Thanksgiving travel plans do take you. Now let's go into 11 p.m. and this is more definitive of the actual frontal boundary itself. A pretty continuous line of rain. It's still fairly broken, and it does look like the heavier rain can be found over to the west and southwest of us. Some pockets of some darker red, which indicate heavier rainfall rates. So that's what's indicated by this legend up here. The farther over to the right, even if you especially start to get some pink in there, that's going to indicate some of the heaviest rainfall rates that you can get. And of course, along with that, we can get the indication that some thunderstorms are also going to be present. But they're mainly going to be present in pockets. It doesn't look like this is going to be a widespread, strong or severe weather maker, but this starting to move in during the nighttime hours tomorrow. So hopefully many of you are off the roads, maybe not traveling until early on Wednesday morning. Well, this is 2 a.m. So if you have a very early flight on Wednesday morning heading up to the Atlanta airport, this is something that could have some implications for that early morning commute. Now, this latest run of Future View has this line of rain starting to break apart. Now, this is kind of reminiscent of what I do really believe is going to happen. This is passing through during the overnight hours. I don't quite think we're going to have the parameters in order to hold this together as a continuous line of rain, but some pockets of some thunderstorms are still going to remain possible into the overnight hours, so you may awaken to a couple rumbles of thunder off in the distance. And then as we transition into 6 a.m. on Wednesday morning, your forecast is really clearing out. A lot of those showers continue to weaken and lose their steam. We still keep them present in a select few areas, but the frontal boundary by around 10 a.m. on Wednesday has passed through, and it's smooth sailing for the rest of the day, with the exception of some gusty winds that you may have to combat on that drive out of town. So make sure that you're keeping your hands on 10 and 2 if you're heading out in the morning hours on Wednesday. Wednesday afternoon, we keep the breeze and some residual cloud cover. And then we transition all the way into Thursday at 1 a.m. Not looking like we'll have any rain chances as we roll into Thanksgiving. Very opportune timing with this rain. We definitely need some rain, and even the trade-off that we will welcome is some thunderstorms in the forecast, because along with that comes your heavier rainfall rates, your higher rainfall totals, and those will do a better job of putting a dent in some of the drought conditions. So now let's take a look at this, where we have been outlined in a level 1 out of 5 risk for some potential strong or severe weather. And like I said, not going to be widespread. This is just going to be in some isolated pockets. So I would say the probability is greater farther over to the west, areas farther within this green shaded area that you see. If you're more so on the edge of this, I don't have as much confidence that you will see anything in the way of severe weather. Really not 100% confidence that everyone is going to receive anything in the way of severe weather, but the greater probability will be over to the west and the southwest, and that's just mainly going to be a stronger thunderstorm or even a severe thunderstorm that will mainly be driven by a wind threat. Gusty winds are looking like the most likely potential threat that we do have, so winds that could get up to 40, 50, even 60 miles per hour if we are to see a severe thunderstorm. But the possibility of some small hail within that core of heaviest rain is going to remain possible as well. Those are really the main impacts that we're looking at. And hopefully, if you are to get something in the way of a strong or a severe thunderstorm, it's going to happen while you're fast asleep. You're really hitting the hay very hard after a long day at work Tuesday, trying to get that rest before Wednesday morning and maybe traveling, driving the family out of town. Hopefully you sleep through it if there is anything. But this is mainly something that we are talking about right now, that we could issue a weather impact alert for, just given the week and the high volume of traffic that we are going to see on the roads. And of course, something in the way of active weather would definitely have an impact to you if you are heading out of the door really early in the morning, those overnight hours, or maybe really late at night on Tuesday. So that's something where you would see the potential impacts of this line of rain moving in. Overall, I do expect steady weakening as this is passing through the overnight hours, and we are going to see a steady weakening trend with cooler temperatures present during the overnight hours. That line isn't going to hold together as good, say, by about the time we go to 5, 6, or 7 a.m. into the morning hours on Wednesday. We also have been highlighted in this, an excessive rainfall outlook. It's been quite a while since we've seen one of these, but what this means is areas in this green shade, they do have the potential for some isolated flash flooding, and that's going to be your areas that do receive something in the way of thunderstorms. Heavier rainfall rates result in higher rainfall totals, and just given how dry we've been, the soil is very loose, so it's not going to take much in order to soak up some of that ground, make it a little more saturated in nature. So the soil obviously being a lot looser, that can make things like trees more prone to being blown over with some gusty winds. But along with that, we could see some isolated flash flooding because obviously that ground is going to drink up as much water as it can. But then once it gets its fill, once it's well hydrated, that can result in the ponding and the puddling up of some low-lying areas, maybe near bodies of water, and just some areas that don't necessarily drain well. So that excessive rainfall outlook will go until Tuesday evening. Obviously, the rain chances still exist until we get into Wednesday morning, but no areas have been outlined in that. Because once again, steady weakening trend. Some areas to the east and southeast may not get rain whatsoever with this frontal boundary that comes through. But this is just according to the latest run of the graph model. Earlier this morning, it had some totals closer to an inch down in Montezuma, closer to the Marshallville area. Well, now it's popping those up over in Upson County. So isolated pockets that are to get a storm or two do have the potential for maybe some rainfall totals up to 1 to maybe 2 inches. All in all, it's very likely that most of your rainfall totals that you get are going to be below the 1 inch mark. So still not necessarily all the rain that we hope for, but it is a more impressive rainmaker than say what we did have in store over this past weekend. Now taking a look at the wind gusts. I did mention that steady breeze that will remain present throughout today. I think as we go into the late afternoon and evening hours, that breeze starts to fall apart. Right there around lunchtime tomorrow, we see the breeze continue to pick back up coming out of the south and the southwest. So trying to usher in some moisture from that southerly direction, but it doesn't quite look like we have a real good influx in the humidity, which you'll see on the next graphic. But then 1 a.m., some pockets of some red color indicating those gustier winds up to maybe 40, even 50 miles per hour in a select few spots. Not widespread with this frontal boundary, but conditions will be breezier as the front itself does pass through and after the passage of the frontal boundary. That's when your widespread wind gusts up to 20, 25 miles per hour will be present. Hence why I said keep the hands on 10 and 2, steady hands on the wheel when you are driving anywhere throughout Wednesday in the early afternoon and continuing into the evening hours. That breeze actually doesn't even fall apart even as we go close to the midnight hour, transitioning into Thanksgiving itself. But in terms of the humidity, that's a prime ingredient that we need for more widespread and active weather in the forecast. Well, that light green color does build in more widespread as we go into tomorrow afternoon, but what we're really looking for are those patches of some dark green color. And once again, just like the past couple of weather systems, they really only look to be present down in southern Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, maybe some portions of southwest Georgia. But our dew point temperature is still somewhere in the mid 60s, so that is going to be conducive enough to sprout at least a good amount of rain. Whether it holds together with a line of storms, not really buying that whatsoever, but some isolated pockets where some rainfall totals will be a little bit higher will be in place. And then after that, the front passes through and here comes the drier air. But along with that drier air, we finally have some cooler air that will usher in for Thanksgiving itself. So over the next 3 days, I have a 50% chance of rain in the form of showers and a couple of storms as we go into Tuesday. But this is factoring in your rain chances all throughout Tuesday. This is factoring in those morning time sprinkles, any of those late afternoon showers that do try to fire up a little bit ahead of the actual line, and then as we go into the nighttime hours. But then once we transition past midnight into early Wednesday morning, even the overnight hours, really before you get into that early morning time frame on Wednesday, I have a lower chance of rain because this frontal boundary, like I said, encountering cooler temperatures that are present overnight into the early morning hours, so a 30% chance of a shower or a storm as you go throughout mainly the morning time frame on Wednesday. I don't think any rain that's going to pop up is going to be passed around that 8 to 9 a.m. hour for the rest of Wednesday. It should just be a breezy and a bit of a cooler afternoon. 74 degrees for a high temperature as opposed to the upper 70s today and 81 tomorrow. But your morning lows do get a bump up in light of the increase in cloud cover and the increase in humidity that we will see both tomorrow morning and both on Wednesday morning. So Thanksgiving travel forecast. I did mention this is a reason why we are having talks about issuing a possible weather impact alert Tuesday night into early Wednesday morning because we are expecting heavy PM traffic both Tuesday and Wednesday. Now, obviously, you may say I'm only going to be on the roads a little bit. I'm just driving up to the airport and then I will be flying out. Well, of course, Tuesday afternoon, if you get north of central Georgia, it is going to be a bit of a messy forecast. You pair that up with some heavy traffic and high volume of cars on the roads, it is not going to be necessarily the best day to be on the roads. So you can expect that uptick in traffic really starting as soon as this afternoon and evening. So you'll see an uptick from your normal amount of people on the roads, just that evening commute time home from work, because you are combining the folks that are heading out on the roads, maybe the folks that are coming into town, or folks that are passing through town, stopping at the Buc-ee's down in Warner Robins. But then tomorrow and Wednesday, that's where you're really going to start to see more people taking off of work, more families heading out of town, and that's why we are forecasting some heavy traffic, specifically that 12 to 6 p.m. window, both Tuesday and Wednesday. The earlier will definitely be the better, and especially weather-wise. You'll want to head out the door maybe a little bit earlier on Tuesday morning, but if you can't avoid it, I would say trying to avoid being on the roads during the afternoon Tuesday will be a wise choice, because that rain is still going to be present farther to the north of us. If you're traveling down to the south, going down to Florida, you're not going to have anything in the way of rain that will be impacting your forecast Tuesday afternoon, but our rain chances that are moving out of the picture early on Wednesday morning will be present Wednesday afternoon in areas farther down to the south. But then as we go into Thanksgiving itself and Black Friday, expecting some pretty light traffic, and that makes sense. Most folks are already at their destinations. I, for one, am traveling on Thanksgiving morning to try to avoid all the heavy traffic on Wednesday afternoon. But then we will see the uptick in people on the roads going into Saturday. Moderate congestion between that 5 to 8 p.m. window. Maybe some folks heading out to college football games, whether you're going out to the Iron Bowl in Auburn, you're going to the Benz. Well, I guess that game is going to be on Friday, but you're venturing out in Atlanta, wherever those college football games are on Saturday for rivalry weekend. We are going to start to see more people on the roads, maybe heading back home on Saturday, but really heavy traffic on Sunday, especially the 4 to 8 window, which the GDOT website has outlined as probably the busiest day of this entire week in terms of people on the roads, because many people heading back into town, and of course you get back into town a little bit later. So try to leave earlier if you can. I promise you that early wake-up call will be all the worth the while in terms of getting back home a little bit earlier, so you have to avoid that stop-and-go traffic, especially in some major cities outside of the metro Atlanta area. So your humidity gets an uptick in between today and tomorrow. It will be at its peak, I think a little bit higher than this point, maybe somewhere in the upper half of the 60s for dew point temperatures, before it drops down as we go day by day into the day before Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving itself, and then eventually Black Friday, where it will be at its lowest. And then we'll start to see a steady rebound as we try to go into Sunday, when we could welcome back in some more rain chances. But before we talk about that, let's talk about some of the numbers. I did mention that steady increase in your morning lows as we go into Wednesday morning. Well, then after that, as you wake up on Thanksgiving morning, there's that cooler air, finally dropping the numbers back below average for the first time in nearly 2 weeks' time. 37 degrees for a morning low as you walk outside on Thursday morning, and then 31 if you are planning on doing any Black Friday shopping, if folks still do that. I know COVID obviously made the shift more to online shopping, but nonetheless, it's going to be a chilly forecast if you are waiting out and camping out in some lines on Friday morning. Afternoon high temperatures somewhere well above average by about 10 to maybe even 15 degrees the next couple of days. Well, 74, not quite seeing that cool down into Wednesday afternoon, but that number is a little bit lower than 78 and 81 that you do see for today and tomorrow. So the cooler air begins to push in as we go into Wednesday afternoon. We don't really feel it until Thanksgiving morning, but Thanksgiving afternoon, 61 for a high temperature. And I do imagine that number is going to get even lower as we go into Turkey Day afternoon itself, then down to 56 degrees as we go for a high temperature on Friday afternoon. Here's the long-range models where we don't see anything worth noting until this big blob of blue comes in as we go into maybe even the early morning hours on Sunday, but really more so that afternoon time frame. Now, this is just what one model does say. Obviously, widespread showers, maybe even a couple storms according to the Euro. But where's the GFS? Where's that green shade? It's not overlapping it whatsoever. You can see that the GFS has the same rainmaker a little bit later, actually not even a little bit later. This is maybe about 2 days back behind what the European model has to say. So there's no agreement whatsoever. I do have a rain chance surrounding Sunday, but I do imagine one of these is going to backtrack or forward track. We may see the GFS trend well earlier, or I imagine the European, just due to the fact that it's running so far ahead of the actual GFS model, is probably going to backtrack more so into the beginning of next week. Not the most opportune for that first day back at work next Monday. However, I think a lot of you will take the trade-off if the rain chances hold off into Monday, so it will be clear skies as you are heading back into town on Sunday. But we'll continue to fine tune that as we get closer. Right now, the main focus is going to be on that midweek rain chance around Tuesday into Wednesday. Tropics outlook, no activity still expected within the next 7 days. We are in the tail end of hurricane season, only about a week left in the Atlantic hurricane season. Cannot wait to issue the all clear. I really have been doing it the past 2 or 3 weeks here on the stream when I've showed you this graphic that I have not had to edit each and every day besides the date. So as of 8 a.m. this morning, still no areas of potential development that we are looking at down in the Atlantic Basin. So it is a bit of a tale of two stories. We are getting some active weather as we go into the beginning portion of Thanksgiving week. 50% chance of rain starting tomorrow as early as the morning hours, where a couple sprinkles will get the rain going. Some clearing into the afternoon that will allow for a warm up near 80 degrees for a high temperature. So priming the atmosphere with some warm temperatures, and we are getting a steady increase in the humidity. Not as much as we could see for maybe widespread severe weather, but I do expect a couple of isolated thunderstorms to be present in a select few areas. And again, we're having talks right now. We're going to issue that weather impact alert for the back half, really the nighttime hours Tuesday into early morning on Wednesday. In all likelihood, many of you may not be up, probably not waking up until say around 7 to 8 a.m. and then making plans to get on the road on Wednesday morning. But there are going to be people, and more people than usual, that are going to be hitting the road a little bit earlier at abnormal times throughout the day. So that's why we are trying to see if we want to issue that weather impact alert, because if you are to come across a thunderstorm, that obviously is something that is going to impact your commute out of town. So better chance of rain later on Tuesday evening. So Tuesday evening into the nighttime hours, then we start to see that line of rain starting to fall apart as we go into Wednesday. So more so some scattered showers and still maybe even the possibility of a thunderstorm into Wednesday morning. After we get past 9 a.m., I think that's the cutoff time. We are smooth sailing after 9 a.m. It's going to be a pleasant afternoon, some high-level cloud cover possibly, but a much lower high temperature of 74 degrees compared to the upper 70s and near 80, which we did hit yesterday. We're going to hit this afternoon, and we are looking to hit as we go into Tuesday afternoon before the rain chances get going. Then a cool morning already. Actually, I would even classify that as cold given the recent warm stretch for Thanksgiving morning. 61 and nothing but sunshine for Thanksgiving afternoon. So very appropriate feeling weather for this time of year. Obviously, it's been a stretch that's been feeling like the late summertime. You can probably even notice it on myself. I was out in the sun this past Saturday afternoon. Wasn't anticipating the UV index to be as high as it was and some of the warm temperatures, but it has been a story of some t-shirt and shorts weather recently. We're going to get back into more of a late fall feeling weather stretch as we go into the weekend. Highs down in the mid 50s to the upper 50s both Friday and into Saturday. Morning low temperatures around freezing temperature both Friday and Saturday mornings. And then we start to see the temperature increase, and along with that, the humidity increase, where I do have a 20% chance of rain around Sunday right now, but that's something we really need to see fine-tuned. I would even say that I could come in tomorrow morning and we may not even see any rain chances on Sunday for your 7-day forecast, but we'll continue to keep you posted. The main thing you need to know is if you're heading out of town later on Tuesday, so the nighttime hours Tuesday or very early in the morning, really the overnight hours on Wednesday, that's when we have our best chance at some active weather, some isolated thunderstorms. Can't even rule out the potential for a severe thunderstorm. But of course, it's something that is going to pass by very quickly. May just want to delay or hit the road a little bit earlier by about an hour or two to just try to avoid what's going on the radar imagery. And again, we have that 24/7 weather stream that you can get a live look at what's going on the radar. And of course, if we have anything pop up in the way of severe warnings, myself and Ben Jones will have you covered through that overnight time frame and let you know what to expect, but mainly just some thunderstorms that could pack a punch with some gusty winds and the potential for some small hail within the pockets of heaviest rain. But it is a welcome trade-off, like I said. If you are to get something in the form of more active weather, you will get some heavier rainfall totals, and hopefully those higher rainfall totals are going to result in some alleviation of some drought conditions in at least a select few areas. So that's where it does it. That's a breakdown of the weather for this turkey week ahead. We'll continue to provide you with updates all throughout our shows and here on 13 WMAZ+. Stay up to date for the latest changes. Until then, I'll be back here at 11 a.m. once again tomorrow.